For 2 weeks straight, Staff Sergeant Olivia Harper failed every combat drill they put in front of her. She missed easy shots, froze in doorways, botched reloads. On the obstacle course, a single flashbang stopped her cold. Whispers started. Maybe she'd slipped into the program by mistake. Others said she was dragging her team down on purpose. The instructors had heard enough excuses. One more failure, and she'd be gone. But on the day her dismissal seemed certain, a black SUV rolled onto the range. A SEAL commander stepped out. He didn't ask questions. He didn't review her scores. He just gave a single sharp order. 3 words she hadn't heard in years. The transport van's brakes squealed against the desert heat as it rolled to a stop outside the advanced combat training facility. Staff Sergeant Olivia Harper stepped down onto cracked asphalt, her left leg taking the impact with a slight hitch she'd learned to disguise as careful movement. Mid-30s, unremarkable in every way the Army had taught her to be. Plain fatigue's dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, so tight it looked severe. The only thing that stood out were her eyes, dark brown, constantly moving, cataloging exits and angles without seeming to try. Staff Sergeant Harper, reporting for Class Bravo. 12. The admin sergeant slid a keycard across the counter. 2nd floor room 215. Don't be late for briefings. These instructors don't care what you did before you got here. The barracks smelled like industrial disinfectant and 30 years of boots. Olivia claimed a bunk in the far corner, last row, clear view of the entrance. Back to the wall, old habits from places where sleeping in the wrong spot could get you killed. At evening cow, she sat alone near the windows. Tray organized with military precision. 3 tables over a group of younger soldiers were discussing scores loud enough for half the room to hear. Lieutenant Grant had the kind of easy confidence that came from never being truly tested. Perfect uniform, perfect posture, perfect teeth. The 3 nodding along were cut from similar cloth. Peters skinny and nervous. Torres built like a gym poster. Miller sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued. Some people get here because they can still do the job, Grant was saying. Others get here because someone feels sorry for them. When Olivia walked past their table, the conversation died. Torres muttered something that made the others chuckle. She didn't react, but she filed their faces away for later reference. The way you memorize terrain before moving through it. The rifle qualification range stretched out under desert sky. Target silhouettes wavering at 200 mil. Should have been easy shooting for anyone with advanced training. Olivia's first shot went wide. The reload that should have been automatic fumbled, fingers angling the magazine wrong. Precious seconds bleeding away while everyone else was already back to shooting. When time was called, her target looked like someone learning to shoot instead of someone who'd been doing it professionally for over a decade. "Harper?" the instructor said, not hiding his disappointment. "You're going to need to do better than that." Behind her, Grant's voice carried. "Guess some people's qualification records don't transfer. Wonder what else doesn't transfer." Peter snickered. Torres cracked his knuckles. Miller just smiled, that sharp little smile that cut without drawing blood. Olivia kept walking. The urban combat course was built from shipping containers and plywood. A maze of rooms and corridors designed to simulate the kind of close quarters fighting that had defined 2 decades of war. It smelled like sawdust and simulated gunpowder, echoing with the sharp reports of training ammunition and the shouts of instructors calling out hits and misses. Moving through it should have been like breathing for someone with Olivia's experience. But when her turn came to run the kill house, everything that should have been automatic felt forced artificial. She stacked up outside the first door weapon, ready, breathing controlled. The instructor gave her the go signal and she moved, but not fast enough. The paper target inside had time to kill the cardboard hostage before she could engage. The buzzer sounded red light failure again. The instructor called, and this time Harper remembered that hesitation kills people. She tried to push through the next door faster, but her angles were wrong. Muzzle too high on the first sweep, too low on the second. By the time she'd cleared the room, 2 more teammates were marked as casualties. The sound of airsoft rounds snapping past her head made her shoulders tense in ways that had nothing to do with the training scenario. For just a moment, she wasn't in a plywood room in the Nevada desert. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere darker and more dangerous where the bullets weren't simulated and the people shooting them weren't instructors. "Harper!" The voice cut through whatever memory had grabbed her. "You still with us?" She blinked, oriented herself, finished the run. But the damage was done. Her final score was near the bottom of the board and everyone could see it. Back in the staging area, Grant made sure his voice carried when he talked to his crew. That was painful to watch. Seriously painful. Someone's going to get hurt if she keeps freezing up like that. Maybe she should try a different line of work, Miller added. Something safer, like accounting. Torres flexed his shoulders, a gesture that seemed casual but drew attention to exactly how much bigger he was than most people in the room. I don't know what she did before this, but it sure wasn't combat. Peters laughed high and nervous. Maybe she was a cook or something, rear echelon stuff. They weren't being subtle about it. Half the people in the staging area could hear them, including the instructors, but they kept their voices just on the right side of what could be called constructive criticism rather than harassment. Olivia finished cleaning her weapon in silence, checked her gear, and walked out without acknowledging any of it. But Master Chief Brooks was watching. Had been watching since the first day, and what he saw didn't match what everyone else was seeing. Most people looked at Olivia Harper and saw someone struggling to keep up. Brooks saw someone holding back. The difference was subtle, but unmistakable once you knew what to look for. During breaks between exercises, she moved through the base like someone who'd memorized every corner. Her gear was arranged with a precision that spoke of years spent where disorganization could get you killed. When she thought no one was looking, her hands ran through weapons manipulations with a fluidity that contradicted every fumbled reload on the range. And then there were the little things. The way she positioned herself during briefings, always near an exit, always where she could see the whole room. How she ate her meals methodically, efficiently, eyes constantly scanning without seeming to. The fact that she never sat with her back to an open space. These weren't the habits of someone new to combat. They were the reflexes of someone who'd learned to survive in very dangerous places. Brooks had seen enough operators over the years to recognize the type. Quiet professionals who did their jobs without fanfare, collected their paychecks, and disappeared back into whatever shadows they'd emerged from. The kind of people who made warfare look easy because they'd made it an art form. But he'd also seen what happened when those same people got broken. When the places they'd been and the things they'd done finally caught up with them. Sometimes the machinery just stopped working the way it was supposed to. The question was whether Olivia was broken or just dormant. By the end of the first week, the nicknames had stuck like desert sand in your boots. Tourists followed Olivia everywhere, whispered just loud enough for her to hear. Dead weight got tossed around whenever she slowed down a team exercise. The 4 antagonists had made it their personal mission to remind her and everyone else that she didn't belong. "Hey, tourist," Grant called out as she passed their table in the Massal. "Planning to visit the range again tomorrow? Or are you going sightseeing somewhere else?" Peter snorted into his coffee. Maybe she should stick to the gift shop, less dangerous. Olivia kept walking, same steady pace, same neutral expression. But Brooks noticed the way her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the way her hands stayed loose at her sides in a way that suggested conscious effort. The breaking point came during the obstacle course. It should have been straightforward, over the wall, across the rope bridge, under the wire, through the tire run. Physical challenges that had nothing to do with weapons or tactics. Just raw fitness and determination, the kind of thing Olivia should have been able to do in her sleep. She started well cleared, the first wall clean, crossed the rope bridge with sure footing, low-crawled under the wire without snagging her gear. Her time was competitive, maybe even good. And then came the flashbang simulator. The device was designed to replicate the disorienting effects of a stun grenade, a sharp crack-like thunder, bright white light that burned through closed eyelids. Standard equipment for preparing soldiers for the sensory chaos of real combat. When it went off, Olivia froze. Not a tactical pause, not a moment of assessment, complete paralyzed stillness, like someone had cut her strings. Her breathing quickened, eyes wide and distant, staring at something no one else could see. The seconds stretched. 5, 10, 15. Other trainees were finishing the course, calling out their times, slapping each other on the back, but Olivia stood motionless in the middle of the obstacle, trapped in whatever memory the sound had triggered. Harper, the instructor's voice, cut through the desert air. "Move." She blinked, oriented herself, pushed forward. But the damage was done. Her final time was near the bottom of the board, and everyone had seen the freeze. Worse, they'd seen what caused it. That night in the barracks, the whispers were different. Less mocking, more uncomfortable. PTSD was something everyone understood in theory, but seeing it in action made people nervous, made them wonder if someone who could freeze up like that had any business carrying a weapon. Grant and his crew were less subtle in their assessment. Did you see that Torres was saying to anyone who'd listened? She just stopped right in the middle of everything. Shell shock, Miller said, with the casual authority of someone who'd read about trauma in a textbook. Seen it before, usually means they're done. Peters nodded sagely. Can't trust someone like that in a real fight. Never know when they're going to crack. Grant summed it up with typical bluntness. She's broken. Somebody should tell her before she gets herself or someone else killed. From her bunk in the corner, Olivia heard every word. Her expression never changed, but her hands clenched once briefly before she turned toward the wall and closed her eyes. The next morning, Master Chief Brooks found her on the range before dawn, running through weapon drills in the half-light. Solo practice, no instructor supervision, just muscle memory working against whatever was holding her back during official training. He watched from a distance as she ran through magazine changes, malfunction clearances, target transitions. Every movement was crisp professional, exactly what you'd expect from someone with years of experience. Whatever was wrong with her wasn't lack of skill. The second week began with team basis exercises, designed to test leadership communication and trust under pressure, complex scenarios where individual performance mattered less than group coordination. Naturally, Olivia found herself assigned to Grant Squad. Outstanding, he said, when the roster was posted, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm. Just what we needed, a wild card. The exercise was a multi-building urban assault, complete with role players acting as both hostiles and civilians. Points were awarded for speed accuracy and casualty prevention. Points were lost for friendly fire, civilian casualties, and team members killed during the operation. It should have been a chance for Olivia to prove herself in a setting that emphasized tactics over individual performance. Instead, it became a showcase for everything that was wrong. The first building went badly from the start. When they stacked up outside the entrance, Olivia hesitated just long enough for the timing to fall apart. Peters went through the door alone, took a simulated hit from a hostile actor, and immediately called out his death. "Thanks a lot, deadweight," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Really appreciate the backup." The instructor marking the exercise made a note on his clipboard. One team member down, and they hadn't even cleared the first room. Grant took charge with the kind of aggressive leadership that looked impressive, but ignored what was actually happening. Harper, stay in the back. We'll handle the dangerous stuff. She didn't argue, just moved to the rear of the formation, then followed orders, even when those orders made no tactical sense. By the third building, her hesitations had cost them 2 more casualties. The instructors weren't even trying to hide their disappointment. One of them keyed his radio and called back to the evaluation center. "Squad 4 is done. No point continuing." But they finished anyway, going through the motions of an exercise that had already been marked as a failure. When they reached the extraction point, Grant was red-faced with frustration. "This is exactly what I was talking about," he said to anyone who would listen. "You can't carry dead weight and expect to succeed. Some people just don't have what it takes anymore." Torres nodded toward Olivia, who was quietly checking her weapon and avoiding eye contact. Should have been obvious from day one. All the signs were there. Miller was more direct. "The question is, how long are we going to keep pretending this is fixable?" The administrative wheels were already turning. After 2 weeks of consistently poor performance, Olivia was officially labeled as unlikely to meet core standards. The paperwork for her dismissal was being prepared with a recommendation for medical discharge based on her inability to perform under stress. Master Chief Brooks fought it as long as he could, but the evidence was overwhelming. Whatever she'd been before, she wasn't that person anymore. The kindest thing would be to let her go with dignity before she hurt herself or someone else. The notification came down on Wednesday. Olivia had until Friday to pass a comprehensive final evaluation, or she'd be removed from the program. Everyone knew it was a formality. The test was designed for people who'd been succeeding, not for someone who'd been failing consistently for 2 weeks. She'd take the exam, fail it, and be gone by weekend, which made what happened on Thursday afternoon all the more unexpected. The black SUV appeared without warning, rolling through the main gate like it belonged there. Tinted windows, government plates, the kind of vehicle that meant someone important was paying attention. It parked near the admin building, and for a moment, the entire training yard went quiet. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the instructors paused what they were doing to watch. The rear door opened first, then the driver's side. Two figures emerged, but only one of them mattered. Commander Ryan Ellis looked exactly like what Central Casting would order if they needed someone to play a Navy SEAL. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent in hard places doing difficult things. His uniform was crisp, but not showy. Decorations limited to the essentials. But it was the way he moved that got everyone's attention. No wasted motion every step, deliberate eyes constantly scanning without seeming to. The walk of someone who'd learned to assess threats before they became problems. He headed straight for Master Chief Brooks, who was standing near the equipment shed, trying to figure out what kind of visit this was going to be. Chief Brooks. Ellis's voice carried the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I'm Commander Ellis. I understand you have Staff Sergeant Olivia Harper in your program." Brooks straightened slightly. "Yes, sir. May I ask, I'd like to observe her next evaluation. Sir, she's scheduled for dismissal. Her performance has been." Ellis held up a hand. "I'm not here to challenge your assessment, Chief. I just want to see her run one more course." Across the yard, Olivia had gone completely still. She was standing by the weapons rack, ostensibly checking her rifle, but her attention was entirely focused on the conversation happening 50 Zempsters away. Other trainees were staring openly now, trying to figure out what was happening. Grant and his crew had clustered together, whispering among themselves. "Who's the Navy guy?" Peters wanted to know. "And why is he asking about tourist?" Torres added. Miller was studying Olivia's reaction, noting the sudden tension in her posture. "Look at her. She knows him." Brooks was explaining the situation to Ellis, keeping his voice low, but not quite low enough. "She's been struggling with the high-stress scenarios. Hesitation freezing up inconsistent performance. The board's already made its decision." Ellis nodded thoughtfully. "What if I told you she wasn't struggling? What if I told you she was holding back? Sir, give her one more run, Chief. Let me stand on the line, and when I give her the word, you'll see what she's really capable of." Brooks considered this. Protocol said he should refuse. Outside observers weren't allowed during evaluations, and the decision about Olivia had already been made, but something in Ellis's tone suggested this wasn't really a request. "What kind of word are we talking about?" Sir Ellis's mouth ticked in what might have been a smile. "Just 2 words, Chief. That's all it'll take." The afternoon sun was brutal, turning the training complex into an oven that baked everything under open sky. Heat shimmers rose from asphalt and concrete, distorting the air until distant objects seemed to dance. Mars Squad assembled for their final evaluation in the staging area. Gear checked and weapons loaded with training ammunition. The scenario was straightforward. Urban hostage rescue, multiple buildings, unknown number of hostile actors, 30-minute time limit. It was the same type of exercise they'd been running all week. The same type Olivia had been failing consistently. Commander Ellis positioned himself just inside the perimeter fence, hands clasped behind his back, watching with the intensity of someone who'd seen similar operations conducted for real. He didn't have a clipboard or headset, just eyes that missed nothing. The other instructors gave him space, uncertain about his presence, but unwilling to challenge someone with his obvious authority. Master Chief Brooks stood nearby, equally curious about what was about to happen. When the squad moved out, Olivia fell into her usual pattern almost immediately. Careful entries, excessive caution at corners, hesitation at every decision point the kind of behavior that had marked her as unreliable for 2 straight weeks. Grant's voice crackled over the comm system. "Here we go again. Try to keep up this time, tourist." They breached the first building and immediately ran into problems. Olivia's slow entry allowed a hostile actor to kill Peters before he could react. The buzzer sounded red, lights flashed, and another mark went against her performance record. "Damn it, Harper!" Torres shouted. "Move like you mean it!" Miller's voice was sharp with frustration. "Some of us want to pass this thing." From the observation area, it looked like the same story playing out again. Olivia, the broken soldier, who couldn't handle pressure dragging down everyone around her. But Ellis was watching something else entirely. He was tracking her positioning, noting how she moved through the space, cataloging the micro decisions she made at every turn. To his trained eye, her hesitations weren't random. They followed a pattern that spoke of deeper programming, They entered the second building, a narrow structure designed to simulate apartment-style fighting, close quarters. Limited visibility, multiple entry points. The kind of environment where split-second decisions meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Olivia moved to the rear of the formation, checking corners that had already been cleared, tracking angles that weren't immediately relevant. To her squad mates, it looked like paranoia or incompetence. To Ellis, it looked like someone whose training ran deeper than anyone realized. They were halfway through the building when he stepped forward, his voice cutting through the calm chatter and weapons fire like a blade through silk. Harper Shadow Blade execute. The transformation was immediate and absolute. 1 second. Olivia was the hesitant soldier who'd been failing exercises for 2 weeks. The next, she was something else entirely. Something dangerous and precise and utterly in control. Her rifle snapped up to her shoulder as she flowed past Grant, already acquiring targets that hadn't even appeared yet. When the first hostile popped up in a doorway, she was ready, controlled, pair center mass before the target could even finish its mechanical movement. "What the hell?" Torres started to say, but she was already moving to the next room. Her movement through the building was like watching water flow downhill, natural, inevitable, finding the path of least resistance while carrying unstoppable force. She didn't clear corners so much as anticipate them, weapon tracking to the right angle before the threat even materialized. The technical precision was stunning. Rifle transfers from strong to weak shoulder to navigate tight corners. Tactical reloads performed without breaking stride. Target transitions so smooth they looked choreographed. But it was more than just technical skill. This was someone who understood violence at a fundamental level, who could read the geometry of a firefight and position herself exactly where she needed to be before anyone else even knew the fight was happening. Grant and his crew found themselves scrambling to keep up, following in her wake as she systematically dismantled every challenge the course could present. What had been a 30-minute time limit became a 10-minute execution, clean and professional and utterly decisive. When they reached the hostage room, the final test that had stumped dozens of squads, Olivia didn't even pause at the threshold. She read the geometry in an instant, identified the hostile positions, calculated the angles, and moved. 2 targets down before anyone could react. Hostage secured room, cleared extraction route already planned. The buzzer sounded, but this time, it was the success tone, the sound that meant mission accomplished. In the staging area, instructors stared at their stopwatches in disbelief, not just because of the time, though it was a course record, but because of the transformation they just witnessed. Grant pulled off his helmet, still breathing hard, eyes wide with confusion, and something that might have been fear. What the hell was that? How did you? Olivia was already saving her weapon expression calm and professional. The dangerous creature who just dominated the course was gone, replaced by the quiet woman who'd been failing exercises for 2 weeks. What? She asked mildly. But everyone had seen it. The sudden competence, the impossible skill, the way she'd moved through that building like she'd designed it herself. Whatever had just happened, it wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It was training. The kind of training that most people never saw, never heard about, never knew existed. Commander Ellis approached the staging area with the same measured pace he had maintained throughout the exercise. No hurry, no celebration, just the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd seen exactly what he'd expected to see. "Chief," he said to Brooks, "I think we need to have a conversation about Staff Sergeant Harper's record." The debriefing room was small and windowless, the kind of space designed for conversations that needed to stay private. Olivia sat at the table, rifle disassembled for cleaning, while Ellis and Brooks tried to process what they just witnessed. "Shadow Blade," Brooks said slowly. "That's not in any manual I've read." Ellis leaned back in his chair, measuring his words carefully. "Because it's not supposed to be. Classified program need to no basis small teams, deep penetration, high VA value targets in denied areas, and Harper was part of this. She was the best part of it." Ellis's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. 3 years operating in places that don't officially exist, doing things that never officially happened. Perfect mission record 0, friendly casualties extraction rate of 100%. Brooks looked at Olivia, who was cleaning her rifle with the same methodical precision she'd applied to everything else. "So, what happened? Why the transfer to regular training?" Olivia's hands paused for just a moment before continuing their work. Took a hit on the last mission. IED close quarters, hostile territory medical rotation. Stateside while they decided if I was still fit for duty. The Shadowblade program requires very specific psychological conditioning. Ellis explained, operators learn to compartmentalize to suppress certain responses until they receive proper authorization codes. It's a safety measure, keeps them from going operational during routine activities. Authorization codes. Brooks repeated like what you said on the course. Exactly. Without the proper trigger phrase, Shadowblade operatives appear to be normal soldiers with normal limitations. With it, he gestured toward the window, where Olivia's course record was still being analyzed by incredulous instructors. They become what they were trained to be. Brooks was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. So, for 2 weeks she was essentially what? Acting, not acting. Olivia said quietly. Contained. The conditioning isn't something you turn on and off like a switch. It's more like keeping a leash on a guard dog. It's still a guard dog, but it won't bite until someone gives it permission. Ellis nodded. The brass wanted to see if she could function in conventional units after her injury. They thought maybe the conditioning had been compromised, that she'd lost the ability to operate at that level. And had she? You saw what happened out there, Chief. Does that look compromised to you? The course record stayed on the board for the rest of the program. A stark reminder that sometimes appearances could be deceiving. Olivia's name sat at the top in clean block letters, her time untouched despite 2 more weeks of attempts by increasingly motivated trainees. The discharge recommendation vanished from her file within hours. In its place appeared a new assignment, Advanced Tactical Instructor, Special Operations Training Command. Not a demotion or a lateral move, but a recognition of capabilities that few people even knew existed. Grant and his crew became notably quieter after the exercise. No more nicknames, no more casual harassment. They'd seen something that didn't fit into their understanding of how the world worked, and it had shaken them more than they wanted to admit. Peters tried to apologize one evening, catching Olivia outside the mess hall. Look, we didn't know about what you could do. I mean, Olivia considered this for a moment. Most people don't. That's kind of the point. But why didn't you just, show them earlier? Save yourself all the grief. Her answer was simple and devastating. Because I wasn't authorized to. Torres and Miller kept their distance, speaking to her only when required for training purposes. But Brooks noticed they'd started studying her technique during exercises, trying to understand how someone could move through a space with such absolute confidence. Grant was the most affected. The easy arrogance that had defined him for 2 weeks was gone, replaced by a quiet uncertainty that made him second-guess every decision. He'd built his identity around being the best, the natural leader, the obvious choice for advanced assignments. And then, he'd watch someone he dismissed as broken casually demolish every assumption he'd made about himself and the world around him. Commander Ellis departed the morning after the revelation, shaking hands with Brooks and offering Olivia a brief nod of acknowledgement. No long goodbyes, no dramatic speeches, just the quiet professionalism of people who understood that some stories were meant to stay classified. But before he left, he pulled Brooks aside for a final conversation. She'll probably request assignment to a training command, he said. Teaching instruction, that kind of thing. Don't try to talk her out of it. Why not? If she's as good as you say, because people like her have already given enough. They've spent years in places most of us can't imagine, doing things most of us couldn't handle. At some point, they earned the right to pass on what they know, instead of using it. Brooks watched the SUV disappear into the desert heat, carrying with it the only person who really understood what Olivia had been through. The rest of the program continued without incident. Olivia completed her remaining evaluations with quiet competence. Not the explosive skills she displayed during the Shadowblade exercise, but solid professional performance that reminded everyone she was exactly where she belonged. On graduation day, she stood in formation with the rest of her class, no different from any other soldier receiving orders and moving on to the next assignment. But those who'd been there, who'd seen what happened when someone gave her permission to be dangerous, carried that knowledge with them. Some secrets were too important to forget, even when they were too classified to share. Have you ever met someone who seemed perfectly ordinary until the moment they revealed what they were really capable of? Do you think Olivia's conditioning requiring authorization before going fully operational was a necessary safety measure? Or did it put her at unnecessary risk during those weeks of failure? And what would you have done if you'd been one of those trainees who spent 2 weeks mocking someone who turned out to be one of the most dangerous people you'd ever meet? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read everyone, and your insights help shape the stories we tell next. If this story reminded you that the most dangerous people are often the ones you'd never suspect, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about quiet warriors and hidden strength. Share this with anyone who's ever been underestimated and anyone who knows that sometimes the most impressive battles are the ones nobody else can see. Watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with another story that proves appearances can be deceiving.